Patient had a critical WBC count. Okay, it was greater than 50,000 as the rules are set for our laboratory. It was greater than 50,000 white cells. Okay, and then we had right here, it's got monocytosis right here. So it's got a large amount of monocells, and you can't even monocytes, and you can't really even see a differentiation between the granulocytes and the monocytes. They're kind of like going in the same little hump. And then your lymphocytes are kind of low right there. So you've got your definitive flag right there. It's telling you what it is, what the instrument called it, based on the laboratory set parameters. Okay? And then you've got your suspect flag telling you that you've got some immature cells in there. And you can see it in the data plot. For the culture, when you get immature cells, they start rising up a little bit. You know, you can see in the data plot they go up. So you've got immature cells, bands, and myelocytes and and metas right up in here. Okay, and your lymphocytes look kind of phased out. And then right here you've got a little bit of debris, something going on right there too. So it's a critical. So you want to rerun it. You're going to have to rerun that, and on a different instrument to check and see if everything that's on this printout is actually true on the slide. Okay, and every time you get a critical, you're going to have to call the floor. You have to let them know that their patient is critical, and you can check the patient history to see where the patient has been trending. Like at a children's hospital, you called a certain floor, and they knew the patients. They came in pretty regularly. So they knew who their criticals were going to be, and they knew who their children with blasts were going to be. Okay, and so when they had that new patient that came in that had a blast, it took two techs had to look at the slide to verify in fact that you did see a blast, and then you had to take it to the pathologist that was right across the hall so that he can confirm that a blast was there if it was a new patient. So it's things that you're going to have to do with a critical that you wouldn't have to do with anything else. But this person, I work at the a stat lab for the emergency department, and our clientele is really variable. So it's rare when you can go back through the patient history and find anything on the patient. So if this was a first-time patient, this particular one was a first-time patient, they didn't have any results on them. And down here in the comments it said too, if it's for first time, do a scan. Okay, but I knew it was critical WBC, and so had to go to the slide to make sure. And this was one that was actually sent to the pathologist because the white blood cell count was greater than 50,000, and monocytes were greater than 1.5, and so that automatically triggers in the protocol for you to send that to the pathologist so the pathologist can look at it. And after the pathologist did look at it, he said that this patient was suspect for having a CML. So, and he recommended other therapies to go along with this patient. Okay, and then this is the same patient. So it's just based on the critical high flag. The patient was rerun on a different analyzer, and a manual differential was performed, and it was subsequently sent to a pathologist. And these are some of based on our laboratory, or some of the criteria that would prompt you to send it to a pathologist. And this patient did have blasts. And ironically, this patient came into the ED because they thought they had broken their foot. Okay, and this is a low event. Okay, they've got a critical on the hemoglobin and I think that's the hematocrit. There are two criticals right there, and a low on the MCV. And on this side, for the definitive comment, it was microcytosis. Okay, and so they were asking for the diff to be reviewed because of the low event. And they were saying that up here on the, let me see, suspect was verified because of the R flag. So they had to check it for a clot. They had to do a manual differential, and this one got sent to the pathologist too, because it did violate some of the rules that Mercy has in place. But you can see right here that on the data plot, there's no separation of cells, and everything looks like it's just down clumped in one area. And also on the platelets, well, the RBCs are moved over to the left. So you can, when it moves over to the left, it kind of gives you an idea that it might be some microcytes in there. And so you want to check, make sure you check the history if you can. And again, in the ED, in this stat lab, we got a very high variability of people to come through. So we don't really hold anybody in the system. So what you might want to just scan for, you just have to go ahead and do a diff for. Okay, and this one is the same person. Yeah, and this is just telling you that based on our criteria, if the MCV is less than 70 and the hemoglobin is less than 5, and you on the slide you see schistocytes and spherocytes of 3+ or more, you have to send it for a pathologist. And this is just something that, you know, after you get in your laboratory, you're going to just be doing every day. You know, when you look at your readout, you're just going to be putting all of those flags and codes together and determine whether or not you're going to go to the slide. And most of the time, it's always best practice to either repeat it or go to the slide, because that slide is going to be your saving grace. That's going to put the period on the end of, okay, what's going on? That's going to tell you exactly what's going on. And if you have to, you could always get somebody else to corroborate the results that you read. Let somebody else put a validation on it too. Okay, this is just this on this one. This just shows you on two different instruments how they'll read. We've got an LH750. This was run on the LH750. And it gave a WBC count of 9.8. And then on the other instrument, we've got an LH500, and it just gives a little bit higher results here. And so the person who did this one, they checked it, they ran it twice, but they went with this one to report out. So that'd be up to you, you know, because they're going to vary a little bit, you know. And they just ran this one to make sure that the results that they got on here were correct. Okay, on the giant platelets, you can look up here for your histogram, and you can see right there at the over to the left at 35 femtoliters. There's some disturbance right there. You've got some stuff, that's debris or something that's hanging there, and it shows up down here, and those can be your giant platelets. And so that's why you would go ahead and look at the slide to see whether or not, to confirm whether or not the giant platelets are there. And this one right here is, they had to do a WBC estimate, because you've got your R flag on the WBC count. They've got cellular interference, okay? And then they've got the flag for immature cells. And there's no separation of the cells on the data plot. And it kind of looks the same right here. But right here at that same 35 femtoliters, you can see that you've got some disturbance, and that could be the platelet clumps right here. So the person who did this, they ran this twice, and they had to do a diff on there because the diff was voted out. They checked for clots, and they made sure that they were going to get, before they put out the results. And the next slide has them what they did on the two different instruments. He ran them on two different instruments, and he still had to do a WBC estimate and a diff. But he didn't send this for a pathology review. And this is just to show you again how on the different instruments you could have just slight variation between the two instruments, but they're really not that far off. And then things to remember that when you're doing a slide, when you're running a sample through an instrument, you have to make sure that the pre-analytical phase is tight, that they put it in the right tube, that you've got the right volume, that you got the right patient, okay? That they didn't give you a tube that they pulled the clot out of, because sometimes you'll run into this, where sometimes you'll get a tube and you'll run it and you'll just get nothing. You know, you won't get a WBC count, you won't get anything. And that means that all of that, the cells that were bound up in the clot, they pulled it out and just gave you the sample anyway, you know. And that's why it's always good to call the floor. If you think that you don't have the right patient, if you don't think that the sample integrity is up to par for you to run, call the floor. And if you have to ask for another sample, ask for another sample. You know, you might get a little bit of resistance, but it's best to have the sample that you need to give you the best results, so you won't put out erroneous results, because it'll come back on you, and you don't want that to happen. So you're going to check and double check. You're going to check patient history. You're going to check the integrity of the sample. You're going to check the instrument to make sure the daily maintenance and the QC has been run, to make sure that the QC isn't trending up high or trending low, because that's going to affect your counts. So you want to make sure that all of that is done, that your reagents you got enough reagents, because you can have, if you don't have enough diluent, that could mess up your WBC counts or your RBC counts. If you don't have enough lysing agent, that's going to mess up your counts. So you want to make sure that you have all of these things in place when you're looking to see what's going on with your sample. And because you want to make sure that what you see is true. So that's it.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, questions. I forgot questions.